Hi, I'm Peggy Farron. Welcome to the Understand Photography Show, where we talk about travel, nature, and fine art photography. Today we're going to be talking with Matt Stock about painting with light and some night photography and landscapes. His stuff is cool. The Understand Photography Show is a podcast first, but if you're watching us on YouTube, you're getting to see the little behind the scenes with our cool set that Joe built. We broadcast on Facebook and YouTube, and of course as a podcast every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So hopefully you'll subscribe or mark your calendar and listen to us every week. We also have a couple of Facebook groups if you want to join and communicate with us. The first one is a general group. It's called the Understand Photography Facebook group. How about that? So if you just go to our facebook.com/understand photography, you can find both our groups from there. The other one is called Selling Your Photography as Art. So if you are wanting to sell your photography, join the group. That's what we talk about, licensing, art fairs, how to get into galleries, all kinds of things like that in that group. And our website, of course, is understandphotography.com, and you can find us on Facebook everywhere just by going to our website. You can also see the show notes from today's show and our back shows, understandphotography.com. So Matt Stock is semi-local to us photographer. He lives in Miami or the Miami area. His photography is going to blow your mind. He specializes in night photography, landscape night photography, and he uses different light sources to paint and sculpt the pictures with light. Very, very cool stuff. So, welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Peggy. Really appreciate that introduction.
So tell us the short version of your life story as it pertains to photography.
Oof, all right, the elevator pitch version.
Yeah,
okay.
Don't go into like your first camera.
So, the very, very short version of getting into light painting and night photography. When I was doing some post-grad work, I was photographing on the beaches of Miami. I was photographing on Miami Beach and some of the lifeguard towers. I was doing a fine art series on them, and realized that during the day, these towers, they're covered with tourists and lifeguards, appropriately enough. And so I couldn't really get the scenes the way I wanted to, and thought, what time are these going to be empty and no one going to be here? Nighttime. So I went out there at night and started photographing them and realized, they don't quite look the way I want. I wonder what would happen if I add a little light here. I wonder what would happen if I add a little light here. And then over time, started developing my painting with light technique. So I've been working on it for the past decade or so. I've had a number of artist in residencies and have traveled all over the world working on this distinctive style.
Awesome. Okay, so explain your distinctive style. What do you do?
Sure. So painting with light is a technique that goes back to really the 1800s. Originally it was done on film with very long exposures, and it was used to determine efficiency in factory workers and testing motion and kinesiology. So what they would do is they would attach lights to factory workers' hands and could see how they were building things. And over a long exposure, you would see those light trails, and you could tell where their hands had been, and they were redesigning factory layouts to make them more efficient. And then other artists discovered this interesting version with these long exposures and said, I wonder what would happen if I add lights to people or birds and they walk through the scene, or if I move a light throughout a scene. So that's kind of the origins of light painting. And now in the digital era, rather than do single exposure work, I do composites. So I go out into the most inhospitable places in the world, glaciers in Iceland to most recently, deep in the heart of the Everglades, with a team of assistants, and I give each one of those assistants a light, and I give them a light and a direction. And so I'd hand you a light, Peggy, and say, okay, I want you to go behind this tree, and I want you to illuminate like this for 5 seconds.
And when you say like this, remember we have a podcast, so you're
got it,
waving up and down with the light.
Yes. So
that would be me doing that.
So think of it like painting a fence. So it's called light painting for that reason, and you move your hand as though you're painting a white picket fence, like Tom Sawyer, just going up and down. If you were to do a tree, if you're doing something that's wider and more horizontal, you move the brush, the light brush in this case, left to right.
Okay.
So sometimes in circles and various other patterns. But I direct my assistants throughout the course of our shooting series where to put those lights, how long to expose them, and then in post-production, I'll blend everything together. So it's really like a digital puzzle. I'm taking pieces of each of these exposures and then fusing them all together and weaving them all together.
Okay, so how many assistants?
It really varies. You know, as many as I can get to come out with me. The most I've ever had was 10. I illuminated a shipwreck, a couple of shipwrecks in the Bahamas.
Oh, fun.
And so I had 10 people with me all around this shipwreck, some inside the wreck, some in the water, some on the rocks, and just doing it piece by piece. Okay, number 1, turn on the flashlight. Okay, number 2, on, off.
Who went? Did people come from Miami to go to the Bahamas with you? How fun is that?
Yeah. Yeah,
That's so cool.
we took a boat over there, 30-foot boat, and it's funny, you know, on the way out there when we're leaving Biscayne Bay, we've got a 30-foot boat and a 25-foot ladder, and Coast Guard routine patrol, you know, just came over, hey guys, what's going on? What are you guys doing? And they're like, why do you have a 25-foot ladder and a 30-foot boat? And I had to explain the whole thing. I'm gonna set this ladder up in the middle of the ocean at night to illuminate this shipwreck.
Wow! So you weighted the ladder down and then people stood on it to do the light painting? Or?
People were me. So kind of the crazy thing was I ended up creating this custom rig to hold my camera attached to the ladder at night. So I'm about 3 feet over the water at night with my camera boomed out, and then I've got divers in the water with dive lights, and I'm yelling and using radio, UHF radio, because I've got somebody on the boat with a spotlight as well. So basically, Peggy, I do very simple setups.
Oh my gosh, oh, that's amazing. All right, so let's break it down for those of us who won't have a team of 10 assistants. So
You're out
let's
of luck.
say, yeah. Let's say I just want to go and do some light painting of, you know, one of your series, which is really cool, is abandoned vehicles in the Everglades, right? So did you do any of those by yourself or with one assistant?
So I'll be honest, I'm not very comfortable being out in the Everglades at night, you know, very far out there by myself. I always like to have somebody else with me, honestly, for nothing else than like snake and gator watch. Because as you know, when you're taking pictures and you're in the moment and you're focused, I'm focused on what I'm doing. So I lose my peripheral vision, I lose my situational awareness. So I have somebody there who's kind of watching my back, literally, and helping to carry gear and things like that. So some of them I've done with just one other person out there. And really the trick is all you need is a tripod and a camera. And you can, and a light. That's really all you need. It can be an iPhone light, it could be a flashlight, it could be studio lights. And they've all got different nuances and subtleties to them in terms of the quality of light they'll give.
So how do you choose a light to paint with?
Over the years, I've kind of developed my own little kit that I've kind of whittled it down, but I've got kind of an arsenal of lighting at my disposal. And then if I know I'm going to do a small scene, I'll bring smaller lights.
Are they flashlights or?
Flashlights.
Mostly flashlights?
Mostly flashlights, some strobe.
Are they those big $200 flashlights, or are they
Yep.
little tiny flashlights?
An ice light or
Okay.
any of the, I've even used hunting lighting spotlights, really
Okay.
powerful if I'm going to be far from my subject.
Okay.
Something that's got a good throw, I'll use. But just little light wands I think are really nice.
Okay.
They give a soft glow, they're portable, they're not too heavy, and my assistants are usually not photographers.
Okay.
They're gladesmen, they're adventurers, they're scuba divers.
Yeah.
So I like lights where it's, okay, hit that button, point it there.
Right.
I'll direct you from there.
Right. Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So you just have an arsenal of lights. What about your camera settings? How do you know what to put your camera?
So
you're on a tripod.
sure.
You compose the picture. You direct your people. And then what's your camera?
Great question. So a lot of it has come with experience. So I know, before I go out there, I know the distance to set my lights up, I know what my exposures are going to be, I kind of know that from experience. But for people that want to get out and play with it, I would suggest shooting in manual and just play with different times.
Okay.
So the nice thing about manual is, you've got that full control, and every DSLR people are working with, they'll let you get up to 30 seconds before you need that shutter release to go longer. So 30 seconds is a very long time. Most exposures you're in, I've found the 3 to 8 second range, somewhere
Okay.
in there.
Okay.
Doesn't need to be super long. And you just get out there and start playing. And you'd be surprised what you can get.
So is that why you, okay, so let me just go back. So your
Sure.
ISO is?
So ISO really kind of varies. You know, somewhere around 400, somewhere from 100 to 400, I would say.
And then if you're doing landscapes, you're at f8, f11, or?
I tend to shoot wide angle, and so I'll let in as much light as possible.
Okay, so you could be at f2.8.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know. Okay, so, oh crap, now I lost the other question that I was going to ask, but I wanted to finish the settings things.
Well, I thought of something while you're thinking.
Okay.
Manual focus, too, is very important.
Oh.
So, you know, at night, if people are used to using auto for sports and things like that, if you're in manual focus, you get that classic kind of where
Well,
it can't
'cause it
find
can't
that focal
find
point.
yeah.
Exactly. So I found it useful to have a little spot flashlight, and you can
Okay.
kind of spot your subject if you really want to use autofocus, and then switch to manual.
So focus in auto, like for me, I
Mm-hmm.
don't have the best eyesight in the world. Even with the diopter on my camera is set to my eyesight, I still can't really see that well, especially at night.
Sure.
So I like to use autofocus. So you beam the flashlight, you do autofocus, and then you take the lens and put it in manual, and then it's locked there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly, and that's a good way to do it. If you feel comfortable doing it, then full manual focus, but it's very easy to do auto, especially if you're close to your subjects. If you're doing stars or there's something really far away, I'll make sure I set it to infinity and just lock it in there with manual.
Okay.
And another tip of a friend of mine, another landscape photographer, Louis Kemper, who's phenomenal out in California, told me, is get a little bit of gaff tape and just tape your lens. Because at night you won't notice if you bump it a little bit. So just tape that thing down, and that way you don't get home to the studio and discover you were slightly out of focus the whole night.
I've heard other night photographers say that same thing with the gaffer's tape.
It's
and
good.
if the audience doesn't know what gaffer's tape is, you can get it on Amazon. Actually, we'll put a link in the show notes, but it's tape that won't leave a sticky residue on your lens. Like if you use duct tape or something, you're going to get gooey stuff.
Please don't use duct tape on your lenses.
Yeah. Okay, so I thought of the question.
Great.
So when you're saying 3 to 8 seconds, that 3 seconds is not very long to be painting with light. So is that why you are compositing?
Yes.
When you say compositing, do you mean layering?
Yes.
So you're taking the same picture with basically different exposures or different, well, your camera isn't a different exposure, but the light painting is different, right?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
I'm trying to get my mind around that.
So in our beautiful studio that we have here, I'm sitting next to a table with my cup of water. So one exposure may be to backlight my cup of coffee, and I'm only exposing the cup of coffee in my frame. Just like the cameras we have here in studio, the tripods won't move, the viewpoint won't move, but I'm only illuminating my coffee cup.
Okay.
Then I'm going to add a little light and spotlight you.
Okay.
And then I'm going to add another light and spotlight me. So the positioning is the same, and I'm just adding and building these different exposures. So in that example, I've got 3 exposures: coffee cup, you, and me.
Okay.
So I would have 3 layers in my finished image in Photoshop, and I would just blend.
Now, do you just use a layer mask? So you just erase
Correct.
the dark you and the dark me, and then you erase the dark whatever. So,
Correct.
okay.
Correct.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then do you use a blending mode as well, or do you?
Sometimes I like to do everything manual. I'm
Okay.
very old school. Manual
Okay.
camera settings, manual strobe adjustment, manual layer masking. I like the fine-tuned control that gives me. So that's how I like to do it.
I'm a manual girl myself.
There you go.
Oh, excuse me. Okay, so 3 seconds
Per exposure.
per exposure. How many, so if it was just something like this is 3 different objects, but what if you're doing a vehicle, because you did vehicles? Wouldn't that be a longer exposure so you could light the whole vehicle at once?
You know, it could be. If I want stars in the background or I want to actually walk completely around the vehicle. 8 seconds, 10 seconds is long enough to get one side, give or take, but it could be up to 30 seconds, it could be a few minutes. If I want to walk around and do little details and blend that into the same exposure. Light painting, I think, is very much so a blend of the art and the science.
Okay.
It's an inexact science. There's a lot of improvisation and flexibility to it. So there's a little jazz happening there.
Jazz. Now, when you use flashes, right? You said you sometimes use strobes, so you use flashes with a trigger, I would assume.
Sometimes, sure.
Isn't that a pretty bright light? Is that too bright? And how do you control that light? Or do you just know where you want it to go?
I'll use a little softbox. I'll pop a softbox on my speed lights or a snoot or a grid to control it a little bit.
Okay.
So grids for our audience and snoots and softboxes are light modifiers. You can find them in B&H and everywhere, Adorama. And they go in front of your strobe or your light source and will either give you a pattern or allow you to constrict or expand your light source. So you get more control over it.
Okay.
So I like having as much control over my lights as possible.
So do you use flashlights more often, or strobes, or whatever? It's kind of. And what instances would you use one or the other?
Okay, great question. So if I'm trying to freeze something that's moving, so if I've got a very windy night and I've got leaves and things moving and I don't want to get that blur, I'll use a little speed light, I'll use a flash to freeze it.
Okay.
If I have a bird flying through in the background or some type of motion, I'll use strobes.
Okay.
Otherwise, I really prefer to use flashlights for most of what I do.
Okay, that's interesting. I've played around with painting with light back in film because the first time I ever did it, I have a friend who runs a hotel here in town, and she hired an architectural photographer, and she wasn't happy with the pictures of their gym. Well, the gym was black with mirrors.
Oof, tough.
I mean, black ceilings. It was black. It was weird. I wonder if it's still like that. Anyway, I went in there. I was like, oh, I think this is beyond my ability. So I called my mentor and I said, can you help me with this? And she took that, she had like a big, it was a photography flashlight. It was a flashlight, but she probably paid $500 for it back then because it was a professional level. And she just went around lighting up different corners and different machines, and we were on bulb. And I had never heard of that before, and it was so exciting to me. And then I fooled around with it a little bit. I haven't spent a lot of time. It's really fun.
It's a blast.
It's really fun, and I love your work.
It's a blast.
To the audience, you've got to go to Matt's website, which is what?
So there's two. So the abandoned vehicles that you alluded to, so that's been kind of a standalone project I've been working on for the past couple of years. I just won a Knight Foundation grant for that work as well. And we're turning that into a book with my partner Charles Kropke. So that they can find on abandonedeverglades.com. So abandonedeverglades.com. And then the rest of my portfolio is at mattstockphoto.com.
Okay, and Matt Stock, spelled just like it sounds.
It is, just like stock photography. And yes, that's my real name.
So let's talk about that project, because that is a cool project. Because when I first went into your website, I thought, oh, he's been to Old Car City. And then I looked and saw that they were in the Everglades. I'm like, I've never seen any cars like this out. I hike in the Everglades. That's my thing, right? But of course, I'm more on this side of the world. So we probably don't have as many abandoned cars as you do over on the Miami side.
Yeah, that is true.
But how do you find your spots? Or
Sure.
Do you get recommendations, or do you just like to hike and you run into things?
Sure. So it comes by word of mouth. A lot of it is word of mouth and pre-existing knowledge. So we've built up this network of gladesmen. My business partner in this, he runs an ecotourism company out of Miami.
Okay.
And he was very involved in the Everglades restoration movement for about 25 years. So Charles knows a lot of these people and these places. That's how we met. And then we went out and started investigating. Once we had a few vehicles photographed, we have since become friends with a lot of the gladesmen and people that live and work out there.
Okay.
And so I'm just asking people constantly, have you seen any? Do you know of anybody? And just doing a lot of research and investigations. We've gone out a couple of times where we heard rumors and haven't found the vehicle. So I've heard from two different people that there is this mid-1950s finned Cadillac in a canal out there. Wow. Two different people have told me they've seen it, but this was going back decades. And I've been out twice trying to find it and haven't found it. And I've been out and they said, yeah, it was right around here, but things change. Hurricanes change the landscape and topography. It's hard to remember exactly where you are if you didn't use a GPS marker. It all kind of looks familiar.
Yeah.
So we went out twice to find that, never found it. And then there was another vehicle we heard rumors about that we went out to try to find. And after about a 2-mile hike through, mosquito-infested sloughs, didn't find it. But every other time we found it.
Oh,
so
how
I've
cool.
photographed 70 some odd vehicles or so.
70?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how much, I assume you do that during the day and then you go back once you find it?
No. It's
You're
kind of all
hiking at night?
Yeah.
To look for stuff?
So we'll go out kind of sunset. I'll go out with a guide.
Okay.
I usually don't make return trips because it's just
time
such
consuming.
Exactly.
Really? 70?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm in Miami, so it's at least an hour drive each way, plus the hiking time, and so I like to do everything in one day. Wow. Sometimes we'll go out at noon or 2 and then just stay the whole time. But a lot of times we're planning to get out there at 4 or 5 and then we'll just stay for most of the night and photograph and then drive back.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I can't imagine that. Although I like to go out all day. My problem is I don't have much time in the winter because that's our busy season.
Sure.
So I mostly hike in the summer, so you have to get up really early because it's going to rain and I don't want to be out there in a thunderstorm.
I've been there, Peggy.
I've almost been there a couple times. I've hung out in rest areas, like just barely got there soaking wet just because it was just like you're hearing the thunder and you're a mile into the Everglades with water up to your waist. You're like, because you can't move very fast. You've been there.
Oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, in fact, getting lightning in the Everglades with light painting was one of my big ideas. I was artist in resident at the Palm Beach Photographic Center, and did that over 2 different summers. And the first summer, that was my big goal. So I was chasing a lot of summer storms out west in the Everglades, and wanted to get kind of a prairie setting with some pines in the background, with lightning in the far background. Because the problem is a lot of the places they're accessible, but at least down by me, you're in a canal, and so there's big trees on both sides, and so I just don't get that clear view.
Right, I understand.
So so that was my big goal over the summer, and I was thrilled that I was able to get it.
Sounds
it was
dangerous.
Very dangerous. It was one where I didn't want to touch my metal tripod. I used a digital
Did you know
remote.
water is a conductor of electricity? And you're in the water in the Everglades in the summer.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Thankfully that particular day was dry.
Oh my God.
But I've been out on a boat in the Keys photographing, and the hairs on your arms stand up with lightning being very close.
That's scary stuff.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
Terrifying. So it's funny now because I've gone and photographed lightning so many times, and I have 2 little kids. I am the first dad who I hear thunder. I'm like, nope, that's it. You're getting out of the pool.
Yeah.
Everyone else is like, what? It's 20 miles away. Yep, we're out. That's it.
Yeah.
Goodbye. I'll see you later. Or we're at a park. Nope. Goodbye. So, and people are like, why are you the first one to leave? And I say, have you nearly been struck by lightning on more than one occasion?
I was going to say, if you live in Florida for a long time, you usually meet somebody who's been struck by lightning or know somebody who died from being struck by lightning. So if you live in Florida for a long time, usually you're pretty careful. You're probably hanging out with people who just moved here.
That could be it.
I don't know, but I know just a couple of years ago we had 2 people die in Naples Beach.
Horrible.
I mean, don't go on the beach when there's lightning.
Yeah.
I was doing a family portrait once, and the people got mad at me because, first of all, they were late, and then I ended it early because I thought, I'm not risking my life to take a picture,
Sure.
Although you did.
I do.
Even now with 2 kids.
Yeah, it's changed my mentality for sure, and that's why I do have a crew with me, and I've always got somebody with me just in case, God forbid.
They can get struck instead of you?
Pretty much.
Just kidding.
Here, you hold the boom really high. I'm going to be over here. I'm going to lay down and take this picture. You stand tall.
I never go out by myself.
Yeah.
It's just too dangerous.
Yeah.
I like to, but you know, like last night I sprained my ankle. What if I was a mile out by myself, you know?
Amen. Oh, yeah.
It's really painful to walk. I would have had to do it, but...
Oh, yeah.
You could get seriously injured, especially, you know, the limestone is so uneven and you're dropping into holes that you don't see. And
Absolutely.
So
I've been stuck in the mud out there.
Yeah?
In the swamp, in the muck, and literally could not move, and said, okay, you guys need to pull me out. I can't move.
That's scary.
I'm in the swamp. Like, all right, leave me here or pull me out.
Yeah. Jeez. Okay, so tell me about your equipment. So tripod is your first most important piece of equipment, I would imagine. Are you, like, is it a heavy tripod? Do you have a favorite tripod, or?
So, you know, I'm not using large format, old school cameras like Clyde Butcher, so thankfully my tripods are a little lighter than his. I use a carbon fiber tripod. For many years I used aluminum and really wanted a beefy, heavy tripod that wasn't going to move, and swore I would never use carbon fiber, and no, I love my carbon fiber tripod now. So I have a very big, thick Manfrotto tripod.
Thanks.
And then I've got a really bright stuff ball head that I really love, that I know isn't going to move on me. So tripods and tripod heads, I can't emphasize that enough.
It's hard because you teach photography as well, and people just don't understand that you need to spend some money on your tripod. And they're like, this thing, I paid like almost $100 for it. I'm like, no, that's not money.
Nope.
Not on a tripod. A tripod will cost you $1,000. And they're like, no way.
Yeah.
But if you're going to do night photography or anything with a slow shutter, you need. And if you're going to do anything with a slow shutter, you're going to get a tripod, so just get a good one. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, it's like, I use the analogy sometimes when people say, oh, I bought this really nice camera, but I'm only going to get the cheapest lens I can possibly get. It's like buying a Ferrari and getting the cheapest tires. You're defeating the purpose of having the really nice equipment. You're not going to get the performance that you want out of it. It's the whole kit. It all has to go together. So it's not one or the other. It's all of your equipment. So if you invest in the camera, unfortunately, you need those other expensive pieces that are going to go with it. Otherwise, it's not worth. If you're going to do it right.
Yeah. So what kind of camera?
So, okay, now I got to put my money where my mouth is, right? So I shoot Nikon. I'm a Nikon Pro. So I have a D800E and then a D850 that I use. So the 850 I love. That's now my workhorse, and the 800 is my backup. And
you said you use wide lenses, like what?
So I've got a whole arsenal in my, in my arsenal, I guess.
I think that's right.
So I've got 1424 that I use. Nikon 1424. I've got a Sigma Art Series 85. I use a Nikon 70-200. I've got a Nikon 28-70.
But for most of the stuff that you use, the wide lens for your landscapes, the 14-24?
I use a 1424. Oh, and I have a Sigma Art, I think it's a 10 mil. Could be, no, 12. And a Sigma Art 12.
That's pretty wide.
So, and since I'm shooting full frame, it's, 1424 is plenty wide for me.
Yeah.
A lot of the abandoned vehicle work, it's deep in the glades, and I can't always push back against the brush to get exactly where I need, so I like having the flexibility of a slight zoom and still being able to get to 2.8.
Okay.
The Sigma,
and that 14-24 goes to 2.8. That's a very popular lens, right? Isn't that one of the? That's one of the big, like, you got to have this lens if you're a Nikon shooter, I think.
Yes, absolutely. I've had that thing for 15 years, maybe more.
And it's expensive, right? How much is it? Do you remember? You've had it a long time.
Yeah, I've had it a long time. It's, $1,200, something like that.
Okay.
Somewhere in that range. I love it. I've had it serviced and taken apart 2 or 3 times.
That's expensive, I learned.
Yes.
Getting your lens calibrated and repaired.
Yes,
but it's worth it. I know for me, when I first started my business in 2001, I bought the 70-200 2.8. And very popular lens, very good. It was like, at the time, it was $2,500. It's not as expensive now. But as I got older, it got too heavy for me. So I sold it, I don't know, maybe, I probably had it for 15 years, and I sold it for $1,200.
No?
I mean, a good lens has a good, and they have a newer version.
Right.
Yet I still sold it for that much. So, and I sold it to Used Photo Pro, so they probably sold. You know, they probably didn't even give me a good deal. You know, maybe they did. I don't know. But it seemed I was happy. I was thrilled.
Yeah.
Because my cameras, on the other hand, they're worth like $50.
Right.
After a few years.
Right. Paperweights.
So the lenses are a good investment.
Absolutely. I always encourage students and people I'm doing workshops with, invest in good glass. And personally, and I don't get paid by Sigma, but their art series is spectacular.
Okay.
I cannot recommend it enough. I've done some comparisons between like the Canon Ls, the high-end Nikon, the Sigma, even a Zeiss. I was most impressed with the Sigma.
Wow, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Sigma has come a long way.
A long way, and it's the art series. It's got to be the art series.
Okay.
Those are spectacular.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. And you have what'd you say, a 10 or a 12?
12, I think
12.
it is.
Wow, that's wide.
Yeah, super wide.
So
But it's sharp edge to edge.
Is it really?
No vignetting.
Wow.
I think it's a 12. It's either 10 or 12.
That's
amazing.
That's amazing.
I love it.
Now, how important is it in night photography to have a fast lens, like a 2.8 or something like that?
Very, very important. Yeah, every stop you're getting below kind of the kit 5.6 is going to help you dramatically. So for viewers that are just getting into photography, as you change your f-stops by one value, or you change your shutter speeds by one value, you're letting in half as much or twice as much light accordingly. So if you're stuck at 5.6, but my lens goes to 2.8, right? My lens will let in two extra stops. So as far as timing for light painting, that's very important. I'm letting in 2 stops equals 4 times more light. So an equivalent exposure, let's say I'm doing light painting and I really need a 30-second exposure, and I'm at 5.6. That is going to be 4 times darker than 30 seconds at 2.8. It's 4 times darker.
Wow.
So it's very beneficial to be able to open up those extra stops. Very beneficial.
Okay, all right. So spend the money on a tripod, spend the money on a lens.
Yes.
What about the camera? Is
So
that as important?
cameras have come a long way when it comes to low light photography, and you see advertisements now for iPhones that let you shoot in low light, and I think the Google Pixel, there are all these ads that they can shoot in low light. They're fine, but if you want to blow up your print to 20 by 30 or anything in that range, you really need a good DSLR to do that. The iPhone and various other phone cameras just won't let you do that. So anything I'd say in the past 2 years, anything from 2017 and on, if you're going to get a used camera, is great. They've really come leaps and bounds. It's been almost exponential every year in the ability to capture more light. And I think the more compact DSLRs and even the mirrorless cameras do a better job than the medium formats. So even the very high ends, they're not really designed for it. So if you're interested in night photography, there doesn't need to be a very high entry point for it. You can find something used, like a Canon T7i is fantastic. You can do some really great stuff with that. Nikon 5600, somewhere in that range, those models, and you're okay to get into this very exciting type of photography. You don't need to spend $3,000 out of the gate. But you can.
On the camera.
On the camera.
But the lens
overall,
and the
sure.
tripod, you
Exactly.
should. Just start
You
right
should.
on those two.
I think so. I think it's better.
So they're more important than the camera itself.
I think so, because as you were saying, as these digital cameras evolve, the previous generations are worth less and less, but those lenses hold their value. So it's better to invest in great lenses, get the best digital camera for your budget, and you can always upgrade that as you move on. There's always that next generation camera to buy, always, and you can always chase it, and it's tempting to always chase it, but I have a few friends who shoot for National Geographic and various magazines, and they have a very minimal kit. And we have the same conversation. You can always chase the next thing that's out there, but you learn your gear, you know your gear, you push it as best you can, and then when it's time, you sell it and you make the upgrade.
Exactly.
It's the best way to do it.
Yeah. All right, so tell us about your post-processing. Now, do you use Photoshop or Lightroom or what?
I'll do my initial edits in Lightroom just to kind of batch and see where I'm at with various images within the overall set. Since I will shoot hundreds of exposures in a given night, I like to use Lightroom to batch and color coordinate using their color tags and using their star system, just so I can tell. So if I'm shooting an abandoned vehicle and if I shoot 3 in one night, the first vehicle I'll tag with blue color and then the next vehicle with green, and that way I can very quickly go through and see where I'm at and see the entire shoot for that one subject. So I like to do that.
Okay.
Do my batch edits to kind of tweak things a little bit, and then I'll export everything into Photoshop and do all my fine-tune work.
Okay.
So, you know, Lightroom to me is the hammer and Photoshop is the scalpel.
Ah, I like that.
Yes.
That is a good way to think about it, because I use both. I pretty much the same thing on my, you start with Lightroom, but Photoshop you can get down to the nitty-gritty things.
Absolutely.
So then, take us through your Photoshop. Is there a net, like a normal workflow for you on a picture? Because you definitely layer them. So you took 12 pictures of this one vehicle. So you stack them all on top of each other, and then layer masks on each one, or do you do it one layer, do the layer mask, then the next layer, do the layer? How do you do it?
Good question. So when I'm out there, I have the finished composition usually in mind before I take my first exposure.
Okay.
So even if it's a subject I've never seen before, a mangrove in the middle of the ocean, a shipwreck, glaciers, whatever, I get out there and then the scene kind of speaks to me, and I kind of, because I've reset the counter on my camera, I don't know, 2 or 3 times, and I teach photography, so I tried to calculate it once. I've looked at, and you shoot a lot of weddings and events, so I'm sure you've seen millions of pictures and captured millions. I've looked at over 1 million pictures because I've been teaching for 12 years, and so very quickly I get a sense of kind of my aesthetic, and I know what I like and what I'm drawn to. So I like symmetry, I like balance, I typically like minimalism, I like dynamic tension, so I know what I'm drawn to initially. So those form the foundation in any given scene, and so I know relatively quickly once I arrive what I want to do. And I carry a notebook with me, and I take meticulous notes. I've got a waterproof notebook and a waterproof pen. I say, okay, this image file number starting here, this is my concept, and I'll make a sketch. So that way when I go back to my studio, I don't have to remember, what was it at 2 a.m. when I was exhausted and worried I was going to get eaten by a gator, I was thinking. And so I've got my reference notes, and so I look at that, and then I start with the most important piece in the scene. So if it is a sunset, I'll start with that layer and say, okay, what do I want to add to this from these other images that I shot? And so I build it on top. So I definitely think of it as though I'm building a skyscraper. So I start with the foundation, and then I do build layer by layer. I find it too confusing to design the penthouse when I'm on floor number 3.
Right.
So otherwise I'll lose my train of thought, and it doesn't quite work. And sometimes, and I'm a science guy, that's my background is biological sciences, but I'm going to say something very artsy. Sometimes the image tells me where it wants to go, and it just doesn't feel right, and I'll reprocess from scratch. There's just a feeling I get, like, no, this isn't right, and I can't articulate it. It just doesn't feel right. And then, okay, I start from scratch, and then I try to rebuild it again. So I'm kind of like my 3-year-old building sandcastles. He's like, no, smash, and he'll rebuild it again.
The smashing is the fun part for a 3-year-old.
It is. I try not to smash my camera when I'm upset.
No. So do you use any plugins, or is it you're just masking?
I like Lumenzia.
Lumenzia.
Yeah, that's a goodie. I'm a fan for layer masking. It's a layer blending third-party plugin that I like a lot. Otherwise, I'm just using Photoshop.
No kidding. Wow, that is really cool.
Yeah.
Your stuff is amazing.
Oh,
It's
thank
very
you.
high-impact photography.
Thank you.
So, now, so let's just go back to your project about the abandoned vehicles in the Everglades, which is really, really cool, by the way.
Thank you.
How did you like promote that? How did you get the attention of like magazines and all that?
So it's definitely been a joint effort, and I think the biggest thing has been this recent Knight Foundation grant that we won. So there were over 1,000 professional artists of all disciplines that applied in Miami, and my partners and I were fortunate enough to be one of 44 that were awarded. So we were awarded a $15,000 grant to turn this project into a book.
Okay.
So that's now the next phase of what we're going to end up doing with that. So it's really just putting it out there. It's talking to people. It's the fact that you're going to hear 99 no's for every one yes, and just being okay with that.
So when you say putting it out there, what does that mean?
Emailing magazines, emailing the people in charge of the magazine, talking to people, using your networks, using your connections, showing your portfolios around to different people, talking with folk. I was here in Naples, obviously, for this interview, and while I was here after New Year's, we were walking around Gallery Row and walking around downtown, looking at the galleries. I went into a gallery, I really liked their stuff, and asked them, hey, are you guys accepting new artists? So it's always talking and asking and building your network.
Okay.
And if you don't ask, then let me rephrase it. So I tell students to enter contests, talk to people and things like that. So as far as contests, I say you lose 100% of the contests that you don't enter. And it's the same thing with galleries, that you're automatically disqualified from something you haven't applied for.
Yeah.
So you have to go out and ask and talk, otherwise you'll never move forward. But it's not easy. It's very hard. It's a long process, it's a hard journey, and it takes dedication.
It sounds to me like you just incorporate all of your marketing into your life.
Pretty much.
So that's because you're in a few galleries too, right? Mm-hmm. A few galleries over on your site in Miami.
In Miami, I used to show at the gallery here. They've since moved on. Tampa as well. A lot of online venues.
Okay.
In addition, yeah. And it's just getting out there and just persistence and talking to people, believing in your work and having a voice. So it kind of goes back to what we were talking about previously. I really like light painting because it's allowed me to develop my own distinctive voice with my work. And so I think that's important, to not try to duplicate what somebody else is doing, but you need to develop your own style and your own voice. That's what people will know you for. So you don't want to be confused for somebody else. You want to stand on the grounds and merits of your own artistry and have that distinct perspective, so people go, oh, I know this is Peggy's work. I can tell it's her work from what she does. The quality, the lighting, the composition, that's what you need to do.
It's hard, I know. That is something that, we do portfolio reviews on a regular basis for artists, for photo artists, and it's like you've got to find a look. So, we have them put together a bunch of their pictures, their favorite pictures, and it's like, this one just doesn't even fit in here. It doesn't, it's a nice picture, but it just doesn't fit. You have to find that look. And it's hard because, a lot of us, our stuff all looks like everybody else's. And so how do you find that look? You did a great job.
Oh, thank
now,
you.
do you ever use gels when you're doing light painting, or
on
colors,
occasion.
or?
I did for a while, and it's so interesting. So being based in Miami, so neon and glitz and glam, and for people listening to the podcast, I'm wearing a very bright Hawaiian shirt with flowers, and I'm very, not ostentatious, but very bright. And I think it's part of kind of growing up in the tropics. I enjoy it, and I kind of embrace it. And I think that it has infused its way into my work. So my work is very saturated, it's very bright, it's very colorful. And I've actually heard multiple people disparagingly call it kitsch, that it's just garish and over the top. But I really think it's a product of where I live, that everything is bright and vibrant, and we don't have gray, we don't have winter, we don't have snow. So things are, I know, that's why I live here, right? Winter with palm trees, that's what I say, winter with palm trees. So people listening in Chicago, I'm sorry, you're in Chicago, come down here, it's beautiful, it's 70 some odd degrees. In January. So global warming is another conversation for another day. But so I think that's it. It's really infused it. So I used to use gels, but because my work is so colorful to begin with, I've gone away from that. Okay. And I think another reason I've gone away from that is people look at the work and they say, oh, it's fake. Oh, it's all Photoshop. It's not. I go out of my way to do it real and on location. So when I capture the Milky Way, it's really there on location. When I capture a supermoon, it's really there. And this will take me years sometimes to find the right location, to have the weather conditions cooperate properly. Like I said earlier, I was chasing storms all summer to get the lightning exactly where I needed it to be, behind pine hardwoods, over some saw palmettos so I could illuminate the palmettos and see my foreground, midground, background in this one frame. It was real. So I composite in the sense that I'm blending things, but not as if I'm buying it from Getty or another stock
putting
site.
the moon over here.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that in today's day and age, people presume, general public presumes everything is fake, everything is photoshopped. So I try to not oversaturate, but my stuff is so bright and colorful. I can't get away from it.
It's your style.
I just can't get away from it.
I like it. You know what? I have an ad for my online class going on Facebook, and somebody said, "Oh, it's overexposed." And I'm thinking, this isn't overexposed, but he probably shoots dark and doesn't like my style. My style is bright, you know?
Sure.
Because I went and looked at the histogram. There was nothing overexposed in that picture, but then, of course, all the haters came out and saying, yeah, that's overexposed, but then people come and say, I like it, you know?
Yeah.
But I like bright pictures.
Sure.
I like your stuff. It's bright,
Thank you.
it's vibrant, it's colorful, and obviously other people do too.
Thank you.
You know, you're in the art galleries, you're selling your work, you're getting grants, you're doing the artist in residency stuff. All the stuff we talk about on this show all the time about people who want to sell their artwork, you're doing it all. So, and see what I'm talking about, audience? He's doing it all right.
Thank you, Peggy. And you know, when I was just starting out, I would always ask people, and I encourage people just starting out to ask those they admire as well. And I still do that. I still talk to photographers that I admire and you know, ask them their opinions. And I would always talk to people and look for this one silver bullet. I would look for what was the one thing. There is no one thing. It's what works for you. It's the time and it's the work. There are no shortcuts.
Yeah.
It's just getting out there and doing it.
Yeah, taking lots of pictures.
Lots of pictures.
Although I am a proponent of taking lots of pictures and taking classes at the same time, and or shooting with other photographers, and or because you have to be improving all the time. Because we have people come into our classes here who have been photographing for 40 years and they don't know what they're doing, like at all. They don't know how to shoot in the manual mode. They don't, but they think they're good photographers because they've been doing it for 40 years, but they're not improving. So it's like, yes, you have to shoot a lot, but you also have to, you have to have somebody else there, I think, to kind of critique or give you, or inspire you or whatever, you know? I don't know. That's my opinion.
I agree.
So what are your current projects? So you're still working on the abandoned Everglades, right?
Yes. So I'm pretty much done photographing that.
Okay.
And the next phase now, I'm talking to book designers and publishers. So we're going to be producing that and turning that into a coffee table book. Nice. So it's going to be, you know, 160, 180 pages, something like that is about what we're shooting for. Big, thick book.
Nice.
I envision it. I want it to make a sound when I drop it. I want to thunk. This is what I've done. Blam. That's what I want. So I've kind of wrapped up shooting that. I never sit still, so I'm working on several projects simultaneously. I'm working with the Museum History Miami out in downtown Miami. We're doing oral histories of the Gladesmen. So while working on abandoned vehicles, I met some folks who've become very good friends of mine. And I think they're a very underrepresented and fascinating community that may be disappearing as that lifestyle goes away. And the stories they have are phenomenal. I mean, just a quick example. So off of the Loop Road, somebody who's been going out there since the 70s said, well, yeah, you know, the potholes used to be so bad that we just throw refrigerators in there to kind of even them out a bit. Like, are you serious? He's like, yeah, you know, you got to do what you got to do. I believe him. And so it's all of those stories that are uniquely Florida, and I'm passionate about Florida history. Okay. I've got a stack of books at least a foot high about Florida and Florida history, passionate about it. And so I want to do my part to preserve that for my kids and their kids. So to me, the photography work is part and parcel with conservation work and doing things like this, these talks, encouraging people to go out and explore it. Because I think if you don't go out there and see it, you won't care about it as much. The Everglades is a very tangible thing. That it's, if you look at it remotely, people think, oh, it's mosquitoes and gators. Why would I ever want to do that?
Yeah.
But you get out there, and it is the most calming, peaceful, Zen-like, spectacular place in the state. And it's a unique wetland. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And we have so few of those here in our continent, and it's in our backyard. So trying to document their history and record that element of kind of human history in the glades is very important to me. I'm doing that. I have a Rolleiflex medium format camera.
Okay.
So I'm shooting black and white film, 2 1/4.
Oh, cool.
Documenting them, doing that. Could not be more different than my light painting digital D50 stuff, but very old school. And I feel like they have a vintage lifestyle. So I wanted to shoot it with the vintage camera. I felt like it kind of was very authentic to what they were doing. So I'm working on that, and then I've just started a new project with coral. So out on the East Coast, what's happening to our reefs over there is terrifying, quite honestly. There's stony polyp coral disease that is now affecting 98% of our reefs, of the Florida Reef Tract, and that's new as of the mid part of last decade, so about 2015, 2016. It was discovered in a small little reef in the Keys. It's spread to over 98% of our reefs. And the Florida Barrier Reef Tract is the 3rd largest barrier reef in the world, and it's 100 yards off our coast on the East Coast, and it's very much so threatened. So I'm starting to do some fine art photography photographing corals and trying to raise some awareness about that.
So are you scuba diving to do that?
I'm going to start doing that. That's the next phase. I'm going to be working with some universities out there to do that. I've been shooting in tanks, doing work, macro photography work inside of aquariums for the past few months.
Oh, wow.
Doing some real interesting close-up stuff with corals. So I think that's going to be the big thing I'm working on in 2020.
Wow, that's so cool.
And that's a whole other ball of wax. So different to photograph, so challenging. But a lot of the same techniques. I think once you understand lighting, and I know you guys teach about lighting, once you understand soft light and hard light and front light, whatever you're lighting, it's still light. So whether I'm doing coral, a baby, a vehicle, I'm still lighting it. So the same techniques still apply.
Yeah. Fascinating. And you're doing all this on top of a full-time job, 2 kids and a wife and everything. Wow. That is something that, we hear a lot, because people are like, I want to sell my artwork, but, I'm working full-time, and, so are you. But yet you're getting out there. You got to do it. It's hard.
It's very hard.
It's hard to do, the important, and I have the same problem. We all have the same problem. It's like, this is what I need to do to achieve my goals. But you're so busy with everything else that you don't get to doing the important, not urgent stuff.
Right.
So.
Right.
You're doing it. That's good. Good for you.
And also, as you say, like getting out there and doing those shows is important too. So I do it. I'm doing the Coconut Grove Arts Festival in February, so I'm starting to gear up for that. So it's just planning out in advance and making sure that things don't sneak up on you. That's the hard part with everything going on.
Everything sneaks up on me.
Me too. So if people are going to be in Miami in February at the Coconut Grove Arts Festival, I'll be out there.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm not sure when this is airing, so.
Oh. If it airs after February, you missed it. I'm sorry you missed it. Go to my website. You'll see it there.
And all right, now tell us your website again.
Sure. So mattstockphoto.com, like stock photography, mattstockphoto.com, and abandonedeverglades.com.
Sounds awesome. Thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure. This has been a blast. Thanks, Peggy.
Thank you. And to the audience, thanks so much for watching. If you could give us a review on iTunes, it helps us so much. You wouldn't believe it. So we really appreciate it. And if I know who you are, I will thank you personally. A lot of people have code names, and I'm not sure who you are. Anyway, if you have suggestions for topics or guests that you'd like to see on the Understand Photography show, just give me an email at peggy@understandphotography.com. Remember to check the show notes on understandphotography.com. I'm Peggy Farron. Thanks for joining us on the Understand Photography show.